When Adolf Hitler died in his Berlin bunker in 1945, he left behind a secret fortune estimated at over 700 million Reichsmarks, equivalent to more than $5 billion in today's currency. But his adult life had begun in dramatically different circumstances, sleeping in homeless shelters, desperately selling hand-painted postcards on street corners just to earn enough money to survive another day. How did a struggling failed artist with no prospects transform himself into one of the wealthiest men in the entire world? And what ultimately happened to all that accumulated fortune when he finally died? In 1889, Adolf Hitler entered the world in the Austrian town of Braunau am Inn, born to Alois Hitler, who worked as a customs official for the Austrian government. The Hitler family enjoyed the benefits of modest middle-class stability during Adolf's childhood years. Young Adolf harbored dreams of becoming a professional artist, directly defying his father's strong wishes that he pursue a more conventional and respectable career path. Those artistic dreams collapsed completely in 1907, when the prestigious Vienna Academy of Fine Arts rejected Hitler's application for admission, not once, but twice in succession. These devastating rejections left him completely stranded in the expensive city of Vienna, with no backup plan whatsoever and rapidly dwindling financial resources. His monthly orphan's pension of just 25 kronen couldn't possibly cover even his basic living expenses in the capital city. Genuine poverty set in quickly. His daily existence became a grim and repetitive routine of survival. He slept in overcrowded homeless shelters, wandered the city streets carrying a portfolio of his postcards, and desperately tried to sell his amateur artwork for a few coins, just barely enough to pay for a night's lodging in a flophouse and perhaps one meager meal. He shoveled snow from sidewalks, carried luggage for travelers, and sold cheap watercolor paintings to tourists and passers-by. Many days, despite his efforts, he earned absolutely nothing. Eventually, Hitler moved into a men's hostel, a cheap, overcrowded, and filthy establishment. He lived among society's most desperate cast-offs, the chronically unemployed, the addicted, the psychologically broken. This community of social outcasts significantly hardened his worldview and shaped his developing ideology. He spent countless hours reading newspapers and virulently anti-Semitic pamphlets in the hostel's common room, his personal bitterness deepening steadily as his prospects for advancement narrowed to almost nothing. By 1913, Hitler received an inheritance of 820 kronen from his deceased father, just enough money to finally leave Vienna and relocate to Munich, Germany. The move ended years of crushing poverty and gave him renewed hope of somehow reviving his abandoned artistic ambitions. In later years, he would deliberately mythologize these Vienna years, falsely claiming to deeply understand the common working man's pain and struggles. But the man who once sold postcards on street corners for survival would one day live in absolute we must be wrecked with the total loving state of the brain, but writers confided in liberation and tangle. His insatiable hunger for wealth and comfort was born in the homeless shelters of Vienna, but it would ultimately be fed and satisfied by absolute political power. The book that changed everything. In November of 1923, Hitler's failed beer hall push in Munich landed him in Landsberg prison to serve a sentence for treason. But behind those prison bars, he immediately saw opportunity rather than defeat. Dictating his words to Rudolf Hess, his devoted follower, he began carefully crafting his political autobiography, part personal memoir, part ideological manifesto. The title he chose, Mein Kampf, meaning My Struggle in German. Published in 1925 by Max Ahrmann's Franz Aher Verlag publishing house, the first volume landed with a resounding thud in the German marketplace. Most ordinary Germans completely ignored the rambling 700-page diatribe filled with political theories and personal grievances. Bookstores across the country couldn't sell their stock. Professional critics widely dismissed it as incoherent propaganda without literary merit. Hitler watched his big literary debut go absolutely nowhere in terms of sales or influence. Then came the economic crash that changed everything. The global depression of 1929 completely shattered Germany's fragile economy and destroyed public trust in mainstream political institutions. As desperation spread throughout German society, Hitler's radical solutions suddenly looked increasingly appealing to desperate citizens. Sales of Mein Kampf began ticking upward noticeably in 1930. By 1931, they were climbing steadily, month after month. Each Nazi Party electoral success directly boosted book sales. Political rallies doubled as effective marketing events for the book. Increasing news coverage of Hitler stoked public curiosity about his ideas. And once Hitler successfully seized absolute power in 1933, the Nazi Party systematically turned Mein Kampf into a cultural requirement throughout German society. Newlywed couples received free copies as wedding gifts from local governments. Public schools assigned it as mandatory reading. Civil servants had to read and discuss it to advance in their careers. The book became completely inescapable in daily German life. Sales numbers exploded dramatically. By 1933, annual sales hit 1.5 million copies. Between 1925 and 1933, Hitler personally earned 1.2 million Reichsmarks from book royalties, more than enough money to free him from financial worry forever. International editions added even more revenue to his growing wealth. Mein Kampf was translated and published in 16 different languages, including English, French, and Italian. Publishers abroad paid hefty royalties to Hitler, even in countries that were increasingly at odds politically with Nazi Germany. American and British publishing houses paid substantial advances despite the growing political tensions between their governments and Hitler's regime. By 1939, the book had sold over 5 million copies across Germany and beyond. During the war years, it was distributed en masse to German soldiers and factory workers as propaganda. By Hitler's death in 1945, an estimated 12 million copies had circulated across Germany and Nazi-occupied Europe. The remarkable journey from complete literary flop to political scripture took nearly 2 decades, but it made Hitler extraordinarily rich. Ironically, Mein Kampf didn't just spread his dangerous ideology, it gave him the financial freedom and independence to spread it even further through political organizing. But that commercial success came with a significant problem: taxes. And Hitler had absolutely no intention of paying them. The tax dodger who rewrote the rules. By 1932, Hitler was collecting enormous sums of money from Mein Kampf royalties and lucrative speaking fees, but he hadn't bothered to file a single tax return with German authorities. He treated tax obligations as completely optional for someone of his importance. His substantial income was no secret to officials. Thousands of Reichsmarks poured into his accounts every month, yet he paid nothing to the government. The Munich tax office opened an official investigation in 1933. By early 1934, they had carefully tallied his unpaid taxes and formally presented him with a bill: 405,494 Reichsmarks, approximately $1. 6 million in today's currency. The bill covered years of deliberate tax evasion, plus accumulated penalties and interest. Hitler's response to this massive tax bill: he simply ordered the finance ministry to declare him permanently tax-exempt. A state secretary intervened directly on his behalf with tax authorities. Soon afterward, the head of the Munich tax office issued an official declaration stating all tax reports delivering substance for a tax obligation by the Führer are annulled from the start. The Führer is therefore tax-exempt. While ordinary German citizens went to prison for far smaller tax violations, Hitler completely erased his enormous tax bill with a single signature on official paperwork. The financial implications were absolutely staggering. Millions of Reichsmarks that should have legally gone to the state treasury now stayed permanently in Hitler's personal accounts. His income from multiple sources, book royalties, Nazi party payments, speaking fees, government is now completely tax-free. Israel's headquarters are all ready to be at the same time. Effectively, his personal wealth increased by 40%, which was the standard tax rate applied to high-earning individuals. This tax exemption became a fundamental cornerstone of his rapidly growing personal fortune. While the ordinary German people were heavily taxed, strictly rationed, and severely punished for even small violations of regulations, Hitler accumulated completely untouchable wealth, shielded by absolute power, protected by fear. This wasn't merely about personal greed, it was fundamentally about control and demonstrating his position above all laws. Tax-free, consequence-free, and answerable to absolutely no one. Hitler positioned himself as existing above the law that governed everyone else, and his fortune was just getting started on its remarkable growth, building an empire of luxury and stolen art. With tax-free millions pouring into his accounts continuously, Hitler began investing heavily in personal luxury. His first major investment was the Berghof estate. Originally just a modest alpine cottage in the Bavarian mountains, he purchased it in 1928. After rising to absolute power, he used Nazi Party funds to transform it into a luxurious mountainside estate, complete with extensive guest quarters, conference rooms, and panoramic terraces overlooking the mountains. But the Berghof was merely the beginning of his property acquisitions. For his 50th birthday celebration, Nazi officials commissioned the Eagle's Nest, a dramatic mountaintop retreat accessible only by an elevator tunneled through solid rock. Officially presented as a state facility, it served mostly as a grandiose monument to Hitler's personal ego. The money funding this extravagant project, Nazi Party slush funds, forced donations from businesses, and diverted state budgets, all funneled directly into his personal comfort. Art collection became his next consuming obsession. Hitler dispatched agents to scour Europe acquiring pieces, sometimes through legal purchases, but often through coercion and outright theft. Jewish art collectors were systematically forced to sell priceless masterpieces at a tiny fraction of their actual value, or simply had them stolen outright, without any compensation. These stolen artworks were intended for his Grand Führer Museum, planned for the city of Linz, a massive vanity project that doubled as a secure vault for his hoarded wealth in the form of valuable art. Hitler also commissioned custom Mercedes-Benz limousines with extensive security upgrades, again, all paid through Nazi Party financial channels. These vehicles weren't simply transportation, they were rolling propaganda machines, symbols of dominance and power wrapped in polished steel. Much of this extravagant luxury was bankrolled by Germany's richest industrialists. Fritz Thyssen, Gustav Krupp, and other titans of the steel and arms manufacturing industries funneled millions directly to the Nazi Party. In return, they received political influence and lucrative government contracts, and Hitler received blank checks without oversight. He casually treated Nazi Party accounts as his personal bank accounts, funding private projects without any financial scrutiny whatsoever. At the Berghof estate alone, dozens of staff members worked full-time maintaining the dictator's lavish lifestyle. Professional cooks, armed guards, personal valets, gardeners. He dined on gourmet meals prepared by trained chefs, drank fine imported wine, and wore tailored clothing made by the finest craftsmen, all while constantly preaching sacrifice and hardship to a general population standing in long ration lines for basic food. By the late 1930s, Hitler's fortune had outgrown the capacity and security of German banks. He desperately needed somewhere safer, beyond the Reich's borders, beyond anyone's reach. The Swiss connection and hidden millions. Switzerland's legendary banking secrecy laws offered the perfect secure vault for Hitler's rapidly growing fortune. Its strict neutrality and confidentiality laws effectively shielded accounts from outside scrutiny by foreign governments. But the full extent of Hitler's Swiss bank holdings remains unknown today. Many crucial financial records were deliberately destroyed during the war's chaotic final months. His longtime business manager, Max Amann, a trusted comrade from World War I, personally handled Hitler's complex finances. Amann carefully coordinated income flowing from multiple streams, substantial royalties from Mein Kampf sales, public speaking fees, misappropriated state funds, and even image rights from his portrait appearing on German postage stamps. The entire system required careful management to maintain the flow, and absolute secrecy. Mein Kampf sales alone generated millions of Reichsmarks annually. Remarkably, international copyright law meant that even after war broke out between Germany and the Allied nations, royalties from publishing houses in Britain and the United States continued arriving in Hitler's accounts until American authorities finally seized $255,000 under the Trading with the Enemy Act. But by that point, much of the money had already been successfully transferred to neutral countries. Hitler also systematically diversified his holdings. He invested heavily in real estate properties, filled warehouses with stolen art masterpieces, and converted cash into physical assets that retained value across different currencies. These weren't simply indulgences, they were carefully planned insurance policies against potential political collapse. As the war turned decisively against Germany, Hitler increasingly relied on neutral countries to safeguard his accumulated wealth. Assets were quietly moved abroad. Some transfers were documented, but many more were not. The deliberate destruction of financial records during Germany's final collapse erased crucial paper trails, while key financial handlers either vanished or died under mysterious circumstances. This international financial web was more than simple greed, it was contingency planning. Hitler knew that absolute power could vanish overnight. Hidden wealth meant options, comfortable exile, political re-emergence, or strategic retreat. But when he died by suicide in his Berlin bunker in April 1945, whatever elaborate escape plan he'd imagined never materialized. His empire of hidden millions simply faded into the fog of post-war Europe's chaos. The vanishing fortune. As Nazi Germany collapsed completely, Allied military forces scrambled to locate and seize Hitler's vast assets. His secret will explicitly declared that his fortune should go to the Nazi Party, or, if the party no longer existed, to the German state. But both entities had vanished within days of his death, with Germany lying in complete ruins and divided into separate Allied occupation zones. Legal authority over Hitler's wealth became extremely unclear. Eventually, Bavaria, his official residence state, assumed administrative control. Allied investigators uncovered records documenting multiple income streams, vast property holdings, and art collections worth billions in today's money, but much of it had already disappeared completely. Crucial documents were destroyed. Key financial handlers were dead or missing. Tracing the money became nearly impossible. One small victory came from the United States government. Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, US.com, authorities seized $255,000 in Mein Kampf royalties and redirected them to refugee charities, one of the few assets cleanly recovered from his financial empire. In Germany, the Bavarian state quietly took control of domestic royalties. For decades, they funneled proceeds to charitable causes while keeping Mein Kampf out of circulation. That changed in 2016 when the copyright expired and the book entered the public domain. Hitler's physical properties met varied fates. His Munich apartment was seized and repurposed. The Berghof was bombed into rubble. The Eagle's Nest survived and was eventually converted into a tourist site. The art he intended for his Linz museum scattered across Europe. Some stolen pieces were returned to rightful owners, others vanished, stolen again, lost in transit, or buried in private collections. Even Hitler's personal effects became macabre trophies. A globe from his residence, sold at auction for $115,000. His red telephone, used to issue wartime commands, fetched $229,000. Gold-plated pistols, once symbols of absolute power, have sold for millions. And yet, the vast bulk of his fortune simply vanished, lost in war, fire, corruption, and time. The man who built an empire on stolen wealth left behind little more than ruins and riddles. In the end, Hitler's fortune proved as hollow as his promises, dissolved in the same chaos he unleashed on the world. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed learning about today's topic, make sure to check out our videos daily. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more WWII content. See you in the next one.